So over the last couple months, I have completely binge watched Better Call Saul, the prequel to Breaking Bad, and with it being the halfway point through season 6, I decided to rank all 6 seasons. Now I realize there's still another half of a season to go. Season 6 isn't completely over, but when Better Call Saul is over, I plan to rank all the Breaking Bad and Better Call seasons like together. So for now, this is just season 6, halfway through it, and then we're going to talk more about season 6 in that video where I'm going to be ranking all the seasons of both shows. I think that all 6 seasons, of the show are fantastic, are great. So if your favorite season's at, lower, it doesn't mean it's bad. I think all 6 seasons are amazing. So at 6 is going to be season 2. This is, like I said, there's no bad season in the show. I think every season's fantastic. You have a lot of very important things happen this season. You have this very strong theme of just self-destruction when it comes to Saul. And it's definitely a theme that it's strongest in this season, but it's really a thing throughout the show, where the show at times just feels like you're just constantly just going like, oh my God, Jimmy, why are you doing that? And this is definitely the season where that's presented the most, where that happens the most, because you have Jimmy in this season who is just given the best opportunity any lawyer could be given. He's got a company car, he's got this company apartment, he's working at a very reputable firm, he has his own office, he can have anything he wants, he has his own assistant, but he just does not fit in this kind of life. I mean, and it's represented through this great metaphor where Kim gets him this cup and he tries to put it in the company car and it just won't fit. And just a perfect representation, perfect metaphor for how he is at this job. And then you have a point eventually where he just destroys the cup holder and just forces it to fit. And that's also kind of a metaphor. And then there becomes a point this season where he wants to quit, but then he realizes he won't get this bonus if he quits, so he has to get fired. So he starts doing all this outlandish stuff. He starts wearing all these suits that, of course, will become a big part of his Saul Goodman persona in Breaking Bad. And he, shits in the toilet without flushing it and then, admits it to the entire office. And then he's playing bagpipes. I mean, he's just doing all this outrageous stuff just to get fired, which is always a lot of fun. And then you have this whole commercial thing also going on the side where you still have the Sandpiper case going on from season 1 where they want to create this. Saul comes up with this idea that he wants to make this commercial. And so he pitches it to the Cliff Main, and he's like, oh yeah, sure. So, but he shows him a commercial from the past that they aired, and it's just a very basic, generic, blue screen and this very generic text, and it's just if you or your family members have been affected by this, it's very generic. So then Saul goes out, makes this whole commercial with that's very emotional with this old lady, and he just airs it without their permission. So that was a lot of fun. All the Saul stuff was a lot of fun this season. Or Jimmy, I guess. I'm going to be using those names interchangeably. And then you have Mike's whole plot line, because this show is kind of 2 shows in one. One show you have the lawyer stuff, the Jimmy, Kim, Howard stuff, and then one part of the show is more of the drug stuff, the crime stuff with Mike, Nacho, later Lalo. Where you have this whole plot where Mike and Nacho actually kind of befriend each other, which is something that we don't really see. But that's a combination of characters we don't really see much in this show. It's Mike and Nacho. So you have Nacho wanting Mike to kill Tuco, and Mike doesn't kill people yet. So he's like, no, I'm not going to kill him. So they go through this whole thing where he plants his gun shards on Tuco. That's a lot of fun, seeing those 2 characters bond. But really my main issue just comes with the fact that this season just feels like it's doing the least out of any season. Like I said, it's important. It is definitely an important season, but it's not a season where it feels like it kind of is one step forward, 3 steps back kind of vibe to it. It's not bad at all. The thing, like I still said, it's still a great season. I just think it's the one that does the least. I mean, you could probably honestly skip this season, and you wouldn't really miss that much. I mean, you'd miss a lot of character development, but plot-wise, you wouldn't really miss that much. Coming in 5th place, I have season 1. this is a season, so a little background on my experience with this. I watched Breaking Bad back when season 4 Better Call Saul was airing. I think it was like fall 2018. Absolutely loved it. Easily became my favorite show of all time. Tried to watch Better Call Saul right after. Just wasn't a fan of it. Couldn't really get into it. And then I've tried multiple times since. And then finally, once they announced Walt and Jesse were going to be in Better Call Saul, I'm like, I just have to do it. I'm going to watch all through it. And I ended up doing that this year. And season 1, both of the first 2 seasons, but especially season 1, were a lot better to me on rewatch. And I know I'm kind of skipping over the Jimmy and Chuck stuff. I'm going to talk about that when we get to season 3 because that's like the culmination of it all. But in season 1, you just have the setup for everything. And I think they just set up a lot of things very well. You have Jimmy that's kind of trying to be this very normal lawyer. He does some suspect stuff. He does some dirty stuff. He takes a bribe. He hires Mike to like take this money from the Kettlemans. So it's not like he's a completely clean lawyer, but he's also not Saul Goodman yet. And you also have this whole Sandpiper thing, which is which is pretty interesting, where he kind of realizes that this nursing home is taking these people's money, overcharging them, and he kind of starts working with them. But it's a lot like the second season. These first 2 seasons, while still being great, are seasons that are very slow burns, are very more about characters and a character study into Jimmy and Chuck, rather than like a prequel to Breaking Bad. And that's not a negative really at all, but these 2 seasons are the ones that are the hardest to get into, and I think, can't say the worst because all seasons are great, but the weakest of the seasons. Now in 4th place, and this is pretty much only because we're only halfway through it, but it is season 6 in 4th place. This is a great season so far. I think this has potential to honestly rise up to be number 1 because I think it's a great season so far, where it really feels, a lot of people are saying that it's too slow, and there's elements of that I can understand, because there's things that with 6 episodes left, I'm like, how are they going to tie that up with 6 episodes left? I'm kind of worried in that regard, but in the regard of, well, did you expect it to move at like a Breaking Bad pace just because it's the final season? I didn't expect that at all. I expected this to be just as slow burns as the other season, and this is exactly what this is. But you have a lot of fun stuff happen this season. You have the whole just takedown of Howard, and it's something that's very complicated, where Howard is a character that's just, he's always been a douchebag, he's always been unlikable, but you watch them just do this stuff to this guy, and you're like, does he really deserve this? Like, it's really the only time in the entire show where you're really not on board with the scams Jimmy's doing. I mean, all the other times, other than like the whole grandma situation, I think season 3, when he's him and this old lady, you're like, oh my god, Jimmy, what are you doing? This is really, other than that, this is really the first time when he's doing a scam, and you're really just like against him, and you're like, okay, I don't think this guy deserves this, because like I said, Howard's a douchebag, especially to Kim, but I mean, it gets to a point, and that's why I think Kim is one of my favorite characters in this entire show, because she kind of, a lot of people have compared her to Walter White in the fact that she's kind of Breaking Bad in her own. Like, she starts as, and a big problem I had in the beginning of the show with her character was, it was kind of like, why would somebody like this, who's a very straight-edge lawyer, be so infatuated with someone like Saul Goodman? And it becomes clear throughout the show that she's as bad as Saul. She's as dirty, as chaotic, as crazy as Saul Goodman. We get to the end of season 5, and you have where they're just talking and they're just messing around, like, what if we did this to mess with Howard's life? And it's just kind of joking at first, but then you get to a point where you're like, even Jimmy is like, this guy's a douchebag, but I don't think he deserves that. And that's just a consistent thing throughout the season, where you're really just like, guy's a douchebag, I can't stand him, but he really doesn't deserve what they're doing to him. Where they're basically taking down his entire reputation. I mean, you start with the first episode where they plant this bag of cocaine in his locker. Then you have this whole scam, which is kind of fun because you get the return of Wendy, where Jimmy, like, completely dresses up like Howard and, like, gets this oil on his face, tans whatever, so he looks exactly like Howard. And he gets Wendy, which was the hooker from Breaking Bad, and he like throws her out of their car, like in front of Kim having a meeting with Cliff, and it's just a lot of fun. That element of the show is, and then you even move to the cartel side of the show, and I think that's also great because you have Gus, who Gus is very different in Better Call Saul than he is in Breaking Bad, and that's something that I don't think we're really going to get the answer to in these last 6 episodes, of why Gus is so different, because Gus in Breaking Bad is so cool, calculated, and just like he doesn't worry about anything. He has no emotions about anything. And Gus in Better Call Saul, and it's very evident, even especially in this season, that he's not like that. I mean, you have just these scenes where, I mean, there's a scene in the first episode, maybe it's the second episode, one of those two, where he just like, he's so stressed and he like spills coffee. He like bumps his coffee. And it's something that small that makes you think like Gus never would have done that at Breaking Bad because he was such a just cool, collected, never got frustrated, never got mad, never had any feelings about anything in general. And now he's just so anxious about everything. And it just makes you think, how did that change? Why did that change? And then you just have, he's working, he's trying to be normal, and he's working at the cash register. And it's something like, and he's completely like just zoned out. Like it's just very not Gus-like. And then obviously you have the tragedy of Nacho's character. I went into the season knowing about the 2 deaths that happened. So I kind of mad at myself for that one. But I went into it knowing who the 2 characters that had died in Nacho and Howard. Spoiler alert, I guess, if you haven't seen the season. Which obviously they're 2 characters who are not in Breaking Bad, so you kind of expected them to die. But Nacho's death is just so great. I mean, this universe, these writers know how to kill off a character. Where you have Nacho, they have this whole plan where he's gonna make up this whole story about this other cartel that's giving him information, and he's just sitting there, and they're asking him these questions, and he's looking right at Gus, and you, as an audience member, even though you know Gus, there's no way he sells Gus out because they would have killed him and Gus is in Breaking Bad, but you're just like, is he really going to sell out Gus right now? And he doesn't, but the plan is that he's going to run away, and they're going to shoot him in the back. Gus's men are going to shoot him so he doesn't like get tortured by the Salamanca's. And instead of going through with that plan, he just completely rips into Hector. And it's just such a satisfying, such an awesome scene. And he's just an amazing way for that character to go out. He's a character that I'm pretty mixed on his utilization in the show, but his death was amazing. And he's just awesome, man. When he's talking about, like, he admits to the fact that he's the one that switched the pills, which very much reminded me of I Watched Jane Die from Breaking Bad. And he's just like, when you go to sleep, you're going to think about me. When you do this, you're going to think about me. And it's just like, oh my God. And then he just like shoots himself. It's just one of the best deaths in this universe, period. And then you get Howard's death. And that's like the cliffhanger of the mid-season finale. That was just awesome as well. 3, I have season 3. I think this is a pretty overrated season. I still think it's very good. You have the introduction of Gus, which Gus is probably my second favorite character, at least in Breaking Bad. Very, very good season. You have the end of the Jimmy and Chuck saga, which I adore. I love the Jimmy and Chuck side of the show. But half of the show is like a deep character study into brotherhood and tragedy, and the second half of the show is very tying together with Breaking Bad. And this is the end of that tragedy, brotherhood, and I just love it. And it's just a relationship that's so complicated because you have Chuck, who is this big-time lawyer, and he just kept helping Jimmy out in situations, and Jimmy never felt like he had Chuck's respect, ever. So to get Chuck's respect, Jimmy becomes a lawyer. And it's not even clear that Jimmy really, that was like his dream, like he even really wanted to be a lawyer. It kind of feels like he just did it so that he would get Chuck's respect. But Chuck is the one that told Howard not to give Jimmy a job at HHM. And we learn that at the end of season 1, that all this time he's been trying to get Chuck's respect. Chuck is the one that kind of just screwed him up for the rest of his life. Just an amazing, my favorite season between these brothers out of the 3, that, because of course Chuck kills himself at the end of this season. And it's just such a tragic story. It's such a tragic brotherhood. It's so real, because it feels like if one or two things were different, they could be like brothers. And you have this great scene in the first episode, which I think goes heavily overlooked, where it's right after season 2, the cliffhanger that Chuck recorded, where Jimmy does this whole scam where he changes the numbers on these files or whatever, and he admits it to Chuck, and it's revealed that Chuck was recording it on this tape. You get to the beginning of season 3, and it's just followed up right after that, and you get this amazing scene where they are brothers again for 2 or 3 minutes, and they're just talking about these memories as in their childhood, and oh, remember this, and then Chuck's just you realize you just confessed something illegal to me, and the tone completely switches. I mean, there's 2 scenes in this entire show that feels like they're real brothers, and I'll talk about the other one later. And this is one of them, and I think it goes heavily overlooked. Going into the other plot line, I'm not huge on the cartel drug plot line this season. Honestly, I don't even remember it. Recording this video, I don't even remember what that side of the plot even was. For me, that is kind of an issue with this show, is that I do find that the law side of this show is so much more interesting than the cartel side of this show, especially in the early seasons. I think later it does a lot better job at making them equally great. The cartel stuff's still really good in those early seasons, but I just don't find it as interesting as the Jimmy and Chuck stuff. I never did, I never will. So, yeah. In second place, I have season 5. This is kind of, I don't want to call it Lalo's introduction, because he gets introduced at the end of season 4, but it's basically Lalo's introduction. This is the first season where he's fully in, and goddamn is Lalo such an awesome character. Love Lalo. I mean, he's probably top 5 out of both of these shows for me. I love him because he can be as insane as Tuco, but he can be as charming as Jimmy. And it's just, this guy's just freaking awesome. And where you have kind of this season's great from season 4's ending, where Jimmy becomes Saul or whatever. And then the last 3 episodes of this season especially are just fantastic. You have Bagman, unpopular opinion. This is my least favorite out of these 3 episodes. I think Bagman is overrated. Still a great episode, where you have such a simple plot, where you have Lalo is arrested, Jimmy is his lawyer, and it's just Lalo gets bail for $7 million. He tells Jimmy, that's nothing to me. You're going to meet the Salamanca cousin, twins, whatever, out in the desert. They're going to give you the $7 million. You're going to give me bond. And then it just is a shit show in the desert, where he just walks for hours. Mike shows up. There's a cartel shootout. He drinks his own piss. But for me, this episode feels like it's trying to be a Breaking Bad episode. It's trying to get Breaking Bad fans to love this show. Still an amazing episode. Still does a ton, especially for the character of Jimmy. It's very important. One of the most important episodes of the show. I just think it's a little overrated. And I think it's kind of a convenience that Mike just happened to be out here and shoot all these cartel members. But you get Bad Choice Road, which is in contention for my favorite episode of this series. And in the end, Something Unforgivable is also just an amazing episode, where you have an amazing conclusion to that season, awesome season finale. And this season just does an amazing job at setting up season 6, the final season, where you have the Gene plotline, which is something I actually haven't really talked about, but you have the Gene, where it's after Breaking Bad, and you have this whole thing where he calls the disappearer guy, and then he's like, oh, never mind, I got it. And that leaves you on, okay, well, what does he have? How is he going to get out of this situation? Which is something that we still don't have answered in season 6. I'm guessing they're going to answer that in the back half of this season. You have Nacho's fate, where Nacho runs away. We got that answer. Kim's fate, which we still don't have the answer to. We have Lalo's fate, which we still don't have the answer to. And it's just does a great job at setting up the final season. Amazing season. I just think the middle is great, but not amazing. Number 1 for me, and this is just the hottest of takes, it's season 4. This is the season that is so low on so many people's list, and I don't understand. This season is fantastic. This is a 10 out of 10 season. This is on par with some of the best seasons of Breaking Bad. And I'm not even kidding. This is 100%, I'm not exaggerating, absolutely adore season 4 of Better Call Saul. I think it's incredible. And you have Jimmy, who has this 1-year suspension from being a lawyer. And that's a lot of people's issues with the show, is you don't see the lawyer stuff. Well, you see a lot of the scam, the slipping Jimmy this season, which I love. That's one of my favorite elements of this show, is being able to see Jimmy scam people. It's so much fun. And this is probably the one where you get the most of that. And you have the beginning of the season right after Chuck dies, and you can just see that Jimmy just does not care. He has this little emotional, he's a little emotional about it in like the first episode, and then he just doesn't care at all. And then going on with that, you have this note that Chuck writes to Jimmy, and there's a theory out there that Kim wrote the note, and that is very, very interesting to me. I actually think it's possible where Chuck writes this, because it's a very un-Chuck of a letter. It doesn't sound like Chuck wrote it really at all. And Kim is the one that received the letter. She could have easily swapped it out and written a letter herself. Maybe we'll get an answer to that in the final 6 episodes. I highly doubt it, but I hope we do, because I could definitely see that being a possibility, that Kim wrote that letter. And speaking of Kim, her character is awesome in this season. This is, like I said, the first 3 seasons, Kim was a character that I liked, but I was like, why is she so infatuated with Jimmy? This season is where I just started to love her character. She gets a lot more to do. She's a lot more interesting. And this point on forward, because somebody said it, one of the creators of this show, I think it was Vince Gilligan, he was asked if this was the end of the Breaking Bad universe, and he was like, well, if we do another spin-off show, it would be with Kim. And when I first heard that, I was like, okay, that's interesting. But as I got further into this show, I realized that would be awesome. I would really like a spin-off show on Kim. I think that would be really interesting. I trust Vince Gilligan with anything. He could make a spin-off show with Bill Burr, who's his character that's in like 3 episodes of Breaking Bad, and I would trust he would do that perfectly. I just can trust. You never don't trust Vince Gilligan. And then you have this just winter, which is probably my favorite episode of this show. It kind of goes back and forth. That, Chicanery and Bad Choice Road are all kind of my top 3, I would say. And you have the opener to Winter, which is one of my favorite scenes in this entire show, where it's really, like I said, along with that episode, the scene in the beginning of the first episode of season 3, it's the only moment where Jimmy and Chuck feel like brothers, where it's a flashback where they're at karaoke night, and it's just so emotional, because again, you get this feeling of if just 1 or 2 things went differently, they would just be brothers and they would love each other. But that's not how things went. And then you just have the ending of this show, or the ending of this season, where Jimmy officially changes his name and becomes Saul. And that entire sequence is just fantastic. Where you have Jimmy goes into the courtroom and gives this very I should start back. Earlier in this season, he tries to get his law license back, I think in an episode or 2 before this. And he fails because he doesn't mention Chuck. And he's very sincere. He means everything he says, but he doesn't mention Chuck, so he doesn't get his law license back. And then you get to this, where he's not sincere at all. He's faking all of it, but he gets his law license back. And that is kind of one of his realizations, that there's no use in trying to be straight anymore. And you get this scene where he fully transitions into Saul Goodman, where he's walking out, and Kim genuinely believes that speech was real, and the audience does too. And it was like, wow, he actually has feelings about Chuck. And then he goes out and he's just like, oh yeah, we got him really good, didn't we? And your heart just breaks because you're like, Jimmy, why? And then Kim feels the same way. And then you get this scene where he's like, oh, I'm going to change my name. And he goes, Saul Goodman, to the camera and does this little gun thing. And it's such a brilliant scene because it's something that we've waited for since season 1. Like, since season 1, we've been like, we want to see Saul. We want to see this sleazy lawyer who, we want to see that version of Saul. But as you watch through the show, you realize you like Jimmy way more than you'll ever like Saul. So it's such a heartbreaking scene. And this show's so good that you almost forget it's a prequel to Breaking Bad. And you're like, it's inevitable. Jimmy is going to become Saul. And it's just heartbreaking. Going on with that, you have the whole cell phone plot this season. A lot of the schemes that Jimmy does. He tries to get a job at first, and he fucks that whole thing up. And then he gets this job at, like, this phone company that's, like, completely dead. No one comes here. And Jimmy is a person that just needs to be interacting with people because he's so good at it. And he eventually starts selling cell phones on these burner phones on the street to criminals. And I really like that subplot. And then you obviously get the whole subplot with Mike. Gus hires Mike to get these guys to build this super lab that we see, obviously Walt, Jesse cooking in the later seasons of Breaking Bad. A lot of people have their problems with that plot line because they're saying, oh, it shouldn't have been a season-long arc. Completely disagree. That was one of my favorite parts of this season. I loved it. The whole Werner wife thing, again, people complain that's a convenience. I don't really see it, whatever. So, absolutely amazing season. And season 4 is my favorite. So that's my ranking of these seasons, even though I think all of them are great. This is one of my favorite shows of all time. I cannot wait until July 11th. And I truly have no idea how this show is going to come to an end. Maybe I'll make a video talking about my theories of how it might come to an end. But I genuinely have no idea. So for now, peace.